The armed services have and will continue to bury their dead with honor and dignity. Hello, I'm Lieutenant Buck Rogers, Officer in charge of ceremonies, United States Air Force Honor Guard. The honors accorded deceased active duty and retired members and veterans who served honorably is conveyed in the rendition of the last salute, that is, military funeral honors. The ceremonial customs of military funerals are rooted in ancient military usage. The traditions associated with the rendering of military honors are based on expedients used long ago on the battlefields in time of war. The volley fired over the grave was first observed in earlier days of warfare, when it was the custom of opposing armies to declare a truce so that each side could clear its dead from the battlefield. Accordingly, the volley fired 3 times was a signal that the burial ceremony was finished. The sounding of taps over the grave also has its origin in military customs. Since taps is the last bugle call the soldiers hear at night, it is particularly appropriate that it be played over the soldier's grave upon the beginning of the last long sleep. It wasn't until the return of World War II dead from overseas areas where additional elements comprising the funeral ceremonial team, as we know it today, evolved. The elements of pallbearers, color guard, and so forth were an expansion and were adopted by the military departments. This expanded version of the military funeral continues to flourish in all the military departments. That's the reason why the elements of the funeral ceremonial team in a standard Air Force funeral includes pallbearers, color guard, firing party, bugler, and an Air Force chaplain if needed. We can't overemphasize that the honor guard teams must be carefully selected, well-trained, and equipped, and adequately staffed. The rendering of military honors is one of the most sensitive and important functions that we are called upon to perform, and we must do it well. It's essential that military honors are provided in a highly professional and dignified manner. Without exception, we must make sure that each base honor guard represents the Air Force in the best possible manner in this most sensitive program. The funeral you are about to observe is intended to demonstrate to you the proper rendition of military honors at a graveside service. You will observe the actions and movements of the funeral ceremonial team elements. This presentation will hopefully give you the necessary insight on how you as an honor guard member should conduct your duties. However, please keep in mind that honors in this funeral are performed by the elite United States Air Force Honor Guard, assigned to Washington, D.C. Certain movements, marching and walking techniques, are unique to the United States Air Force Honor Guard and are not meant or intended for you to adopt or achieve their level of proficiency. Rendering honors is a full-time job for this honor guard. When they aren't providing honors, they are training. Their performance should be your cue in gaining full knowledge of what is to be done, when, where, and how it's to be done. The elite United States Air Force Honor Guard also has its own organizational uniform, which is quite different from the standard base and Major Command Honor Guard uniforms. In addition to this presentation, you may obtain detailed training in the step-by-step movements and procedures for each honor guard element by reviewing and using the slide tape training program that is available through your local base audiovisual office.
Note how the Honor Guard members exercise proper decorum in preparing and placing themselves in formation for their march to the grave. Once in position, the NCOIC gives the command, forward march. In their march to the grave, note how the Honor Guard members break off. The firing party is now going to its proper location. Additionally, the pallbearers open ranks and place themselves at each side of the curb. The color guard proceeds to its proper location at the foot of the grave, while the bugler goes to his respective location where he'll sound taps. Once all Honor Guard members have placed themselves in proper position, they execute the necessary movements and await the arrival of the funeral procession at the grave site. As the procession approaches, the pallbearers execute a hand salute while the hearse passes, and they hold that position until the hearse has come to a complete stop.
Order. Oh.
The funeral director then opens the hearse door, and the pallbearers simultaneously place themselves in the center of the roadway, execute the proper movements, and proceed toward the hearse. They then execute appropriate movements in positioning themselves to remove the casket from the hearse. Again, the movements executed by the United States Air Force Honor Guard are unique to that honor guard only. The two pallbearers closest to the hearse make sure that the flag properly drapes the casket and will pull the casket out of the hearse and pass it to the other pallbearers. As you can see, these procedures are done slowly and carefully. The pallbearers now execute 3 steps back to adequately clear the hearse. They will execute the proper turn and will then proceed to the grave site. If the decedent is entitled to an aerial flyover, the aircraft will fly over the grave in the missing man formation, while relatives and friends are proceeding to the grave site. The procession then continues to the grave site. This procession is preceded by the funeral director and the clergyman that will officiate at the graveside service. Note how the NCOIC renders a hand salute as he passes by the flag-draped casket in positioning himself at the foot of the grave. The funeral director stops the procession while the casket is being properly placed on the lowering device. And the pallbearers raise the flag to waist-height level and hold it taut. Once this has been done, the funeral director then proceeds in having relatives and friends take their seats. Once seated, the clergyman begins to read the prayers, and during the ceremony it is common for the clergyman to sprinkle earth on the casket. In doing so, the two pallbearers closest to the head end of the casket raise the flag for that purpose. The clergyman many times gives a blessing by raising his hand, which is also a signal for the conclusion of the service. The funeral director then alerts the family to the firing of the volleys, which will now be executed by the firing party. The bugler will now sound taps. At the conclusion of taps, the bugler will render a hand salute. The pallbearers will now fold the flag. Note how carefully the first fold is made to ensure both sides are even and the flag is held as taut as possible in making the second fold. This will permit the proper triangular fold, whereby in making the final fold there will be no red portion of the flag showing. While the flag is being folded at approximately halfway down the casket, the NCOIC moves from his position to place himself at the head end of the grave to receive the flag from the pallbearer at the head end of the casket. Note, the last two pallbearers are to make sure that the folded flag is tight and smooth, having no wrinkles, and there is no red portion of the flag showing. The flag is then presented to the NCOIC. The pallbearer renders a slow hand salute and will execute the appropriate movement in returning to his original position. The NCOIC then proceeds to the next of kin, presents the flag, and makes a statement such as, "This flag is offered by a grateful nation in memory of the faithful service performed by your loved one." He then renders a slow hand salute and returns to his original position. Relatives and friends should then leave the gravesite. However, if they linger for whatever reason, the honor guard may execute the proper movements and leave the grave. They then proceed to the original assembly point by regrouping in the required formation at some suitable point in the roadway.
We who came home must never forget those who could not.
I think we slowed them down at any rate, and we made them work pretty hard for what they got. I feel that I walked out to the C-141 in Hanoi with my head held high, and I felt about 10 feet tall. So we brought our honor home with us, a little scarred, but we brought it home.
𝗧𝗔𝗞𝗘 hit the aircraft. The aircraft started to roll and descend, and I got out somewhere under 350 feet. That was the longest day of my life, the day that I got shut down.
Every move they made from the day I arrived in there was designed to get something out of me or to get something against the United States. It was war in that camp, just as if it were war down on the battlefront. Every single day, every minute of the day.
The North Vietnamese told us when we were their prisoners that when we came home, we would be immediately thrown in jail, that the average American citizen thought that we were, in fact, criminals. They were very much against us. Of course, we didn't believe this, but we didn't know to what degree the lie was made. And it was about as far to the other side as possible, because the reaction that we received since we have returned home has just been fantastic.
Sir. Let me test you. Okay, okay. Hi. How are you, huh? Hi. Boy, I'm great. You're all just wonderful. You're just wonderful. You really are.
Although I'm not a very religious man, I shut my eyes and said about 30 seconds of silent prayer. And I felt, as I've never felt before in my life, quite obviously, the realization that it really is true. We are here, and we can't go back. And we're here. And at that time, in those instances, I probably became a better American than I've ever been.
Well, we're really receiving the things that I think would be more appropriately due to the guys that will always be over there, that are buried in the dirt and the mud of North Vietnam and the jungles of South Vietnam also. We're a symbol of the people that were lost. We happen to be regained.
We always knew that you would not forget us, that you would not leave us in that foreign land. And our thoughts were always of our God, our families, and the honor of America. God bless America and its wonderful people. Thank you.
It was in 1967 that I was sent by the Defense Department to do some documentary paintings about the Air Force people at work in Southeast Asia then. I just got the message from the other pilots that if I was painting their story sincerely, I should include in my efforts some kind of documenting of the men in the prisons up in the north. I knew that there was isolation. I knew they were holding them incommunicado. I knew our men, and I knew that they would, under the most severe circumstances, try to be strong. But I visualized it would be dark and lonely and terribly bleak. I remember especially Colonel Flynn's comment when he said, yes, he says, they're very good, but they're not harsh enough. And then he said something to the effect that our story is not just coming off the plane and going to the barber shop. You have to know something of our 6 years there. Then he said, can you paint torture?
They went through an incredible amount of pressure, both casual pressure from just being in prison camp, but more particularly from organized physical and psychological abuse. And usually alone.
Well, I found a closeness to God that I had never found before, and a couple of times when I really needed him, well, he came booming through.
Faith in God was probably the cornerstone of my resistance. I was able to stand firm when I thought that the end looked like it was in sight and all was lost.
Colonel Day told me about his upper arm that was broken for a period and then paralyzed after being constricted, and told me that the arm was about the size of a bone plus maybe a blood vessel or two. And
I had evaded, as I say, 32 patrols, and unfortunately was shot and captured by an ambush patrol on my 13th day out.
He was in solitary for 37 months or something like that, and he said that they just look at his arm and his hand and try and get him to move, and eventually he thought he could see him move, and then he knew he could see him move, and that gave him enough to look forward to, so he just kept working at it, and it's amazing.
It was easier to go through each month than it was to go through each day.
Yeah, and we used to watch beetle eggs hatch. That takes about 11 days.
But they had a big push to get the American POW to write these statements condemning the war in hopes that internationally it would embarrass the United States. Of course, each of these was a carbon copy of the one before, and every one that I know of was extracted by means of torture.
In my capacity as a debriefer, I have spoken to half of the returnees that have come to this hospital. One of the most important things we have learned is how vital communication was for their daily existence. Within a camp, they used some very ingenious methods of communicating. Primarily, they would learn to talk through walls. And by talking through walls, we're talking about walls that may be 18 inches to 2 feet thick.
We'd pass poetry through the wall, learn poems. If you're fortunate enough to live by somebody who knew a foreign language well, they would instruct you and you could study a foreign language.
They utilized their sense of humor, which sounds sort of macabre to talk about a sense of humor when you're getting the hell beat out of you. But they were able to utilize their sense of humor to resist this in a very real way. Then, of course, as soon as they got together, they were able to band back together and gain support from their common, against their common enemy.
By staying organized and uniting against the V, we forced them to give us medical attention. Even though it wasn't much, it was more than we would have got before.
It was a lot of hours of pure boredom. And there were a few moments of stark terror, too.
Captain Brazelton was called to quiz, which was their jargon for interrogation. And during the process of the conversation with his interrogator, he asked Captain Brazelton a question. Captain Brazelton gave him the answer, and the interrogator got a puzzled look on his face for a moment, and then he leaned across the table and putting his elbow on the table and summoning up all of his knowledge of American idioms, he stared into Captain Brazelton's eyes and said, "Honest Injun?"
Chewing on a piece of grass, walking down the road. Tell me, how long you gonna stay here, Joe? Some people say this town don't look good in snow. You don't care, I know. Ventura Highway in the sunshine, where the days are longer, the nights are stronger than moonshine. You're gonna go, I know.
None of them seemed to have any bitterness about what they'd been through, and that really impressed me. And they were also warm and open.
Colonel Lurie came up one day to the nurses' station, very straight-faced, and said, "Do you know why they give second lieutenants gold bars?" And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "That's to tell you apart from the officers."
I'm Colonel George Fong. I'm the homecoming processing team chief. The job entails supervising the processing of our returnees, coordinating of such activities as finance, personnel, the debriefing, and the medical aspects. We're pretty much involved in almost everything that the POWs do. After the first group of returnees came in, I had to be real sure that I had on my uniform when I went downstairs. The thought was that I shouldn't be down in the ward in a pair of black pajamas because the returnees might think I'm a VC. I'm joking, of course.
And when it's convenient for us, they bring in the experts, and they're bringing them in apparently from all over the Air Force, and they're taking the time to tell us what we want to know, to give us the answers to our questions. Where do we go from here?
Hey, Will, that looks like a pretty good lunch you got there. Oh, brother. How's everything going?
Just fine, sir. Every place we go, we meet with a fine reception.
You know, we had a lot of thoughts as to what kind of diet would be required for these gentlemen. And almost without exception, they required nothing in the way of a special diet. They ate as much as they wanted of anything they chose. The only somewhat unique thing about the diet for those of us who were based in the hospital was their apparent relish for the hospital diet, which of course is not shared by the rest of us.
Wishing on a falling star, waiting for the early train. Sorry boy, but I've been hit by purple rain. Oh, come on, Joe, you can always change your name. Thanks a lot, son, just the same. Ventura Highway in the sunshine, where the days are longer, the nights are stronger than moonshine. You're gonna go, I know.
There have been some surprises. The length of hair, the style of clothes, the material clothes are made of.
I really liked the miniskirts. I was just afraid that they were going to be out of style before I got back.
And you know, getting used to miniskirts is a big shock.
I think the men's styles are really quite a change. I really like them. The colors, the styles, the flared pants, the double knit trousers especially. I really think they're the most comfortable thing I've ever worn. I just wonder where they've been all my life.
I have not heard a single good thing about the United States in 6 years until I got the clock. Everything you heard was bad.
Signal. The whole world is watching. Peace now.
Keep the bayonets high with the order about face.
Stop the war.
And now they've got the demonstrators on the ramp of
I'm sure that we will all be better men and better officers for the experience that we've had.
I knew the day I was captured that I was going to be released. There was no doubt in my mind about that. I knew that we would get out.
Most of them, if they weren't reflective when they went over there, have come back reflective and appreciative of a lot of the things that most of us take for granted.
I have more of a purpose in life. I think I know more of what I want to do compared to before.
Just walking out of the front door and doing a 360 and looking at the clouds and the stars and the grass and that sort of thing is really an experience.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear mine. Happy birthday to you.
There you go,
I had a suspicion something was coming up by the way people were milling around, but I didn't expect this, really. I was expecting the bachelors to pull something sneaky. I'm impressed.
You all set to leave?
All set.
Well,
Yeah.
take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much for everything.
We enjoyed having you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Come back and see us.
I sure will. Ellie, thank you. Thank
Good
you.
luck, sir. When the first group of returnees left, I really felt like we were losing friends because we really got to know them, especially because they came in at in different groups of small groups, and we got to talk to them a lot more and got to know them, each one of them. And I really felt like I was losing a friend as each one left.
Right.
John? Right? Have fun. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you. Same here. Good seeing you again. You all set? You all set? Okay.
See, primarily the last couple of weeks have been sort of a gentle reintroduction into normal society. But once I climb into my automobile and drive back toward my home, it's going to be an opening of a large door, it seems, from a small room.
'Cause the free wind is blowing through your hair, and the days surround your daylight there. Seasons crying, no despair. Alligator lizards in the air, in the air.
know approximately where you punched out?
About 40 miles east of Hanoi.
About 40 miles.
Due east. Just coming into the rolling hills north of Haiphong.
We're interested in specifics of his shoot down so that we can learn the lessons which may improve our equipment or our tactics for the future considerations. We want to know of his treatment. We want to be able to understand the mentality of the people that kept him in captivity. We're interested in things that they may do to their own people. How do they treat their own people? What is life like?
You just can't realize the pressure anybody's under when they're MIA. And then eventually, you find out that they are a POW. It just changes your whole outlook on everything.
Have you heard about when your husband should be back, when he's expected?
I know the last date he'll come home would be the 28th of March. So at least that's not too long.
So I don't think there'll be any problem at all about flying again.
Yeah, speaking of flying, I got shot down in F-100 up there, F-100, Whistleblowers. And for many years, we sort of made a few jokes about SAC, etc. Wondering when they were going to get into the war.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, then finally came December 18th, and we knew SAC was there.
The guards initially tried to control the prisoners, but in very short order were so frightened themselves they were ducking in their manhole covers and under boards, and they didn't see them for the rest of the missions. And after the first evening, they never even came to see what they were doing inside their cells during the bombing raids.
Well, I've flown about 160 missions in the B-52 over there, and then to watch the last 3 or 4 nights from the other end was really impressive.
There was a man on my crew that didn't turn up in camp. We kept looking for him because he had checked in that he was okay on the airplane. And come to find out, he had been evading the enemy for 12 days before he surrendered to the enemy.
Captain Peter P. Camarota.
Captain Peter Camarota was the man's name. He did a good job, though, evading for 12 days.
I'd like to thank everybody for the warm welcome we've gotten all the way across, and it's great to be back home at March.
I'm glad the POWs are back, and I'm just curious to see how they will adjust.
But certainly when they get back with their families, it isn't going to be too hard or take too long to fit in.
My wife has done such an outstanding job then that when I got home, actually, it was like being gone for months rather than years. There has been absolutely no transition problem at all, and I'm very grateful for that. I did receive a few pictures in North Vietnam. If I hadn't, I'd have probably been scared out of my wits when I came home and actually did see my children. When I left in February of '66, my son, my youngest of 3, was 9 months old. But basically, there's no change in their personalities. I recognize them. My son is a new entity to me, but he's accepted me very, very quickly and very easily. I've gone to this little fellow's schoolroom and answered a bunch of very surprisingly intelligent questions from, what grade is he in?
Second grade.
Second grade. They wanted to know how I liked being a prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to know what I ate.
Who won the war?
They wanted to know who won the war, which is an interesting question in itself. They wanted to know if it was cold. They wanted to know if it was hot.
But they knew what was happening. They were aware, and that was when they were even in first grade. I think probably more aware than some adults.
Well, I think that the release of the prisoners of war is one of the greatest things that's happened in this decade.
Well, it's really wonderful to have everybody home together again.
And I think it's a very good thing for the spirit of the country.
We believe that we as a group are not unique. We think that the 575 or 600 people that are involved are representative of the services, representative of all of the people within our services, because after all, we were not hand-picked to be sent over there. We were on the wheel of fortune.
And I wish that we could bring them all back, but we can't, and we never have from any engagement that we've had. And those are the people that really caught the brunt of the war. I think those are the people that we owe so much to.
The V had told us for so long that the American public wasn't behind us, but yet they were out there hollering, "God bless America." You could tell that there were the Americans that fought in every war since time began, since we've been a country. And it made you proud again to be an American. Proud that maybe that we did something there, that it wasn't all in vain, that there were Americans behind us. And that people like the V will never last and never endure with theirs, because they rule with fear, and that's the only thing they know. They only know force, and they only know fear. And if they can't rule with that, they don't rule. We don't act like that. Those Americans are free, and they're there because they're free men. Those children were hollering and screaming because they wanted to, not because someone was forced them to, or someone drove them up there to make them do it. And that's enough to make you proud. In those 5 or 6 years that we spent up there, or 7, or whatever they may be, were worth that. And maybe those children won't have to go fight. I hope so.
Colonel Lynn was the first man in blue that I had seen since April of 1966. He represented everything that I stood for, the reason why I had spent so much time in North Vietnam, and that he stood for freedom, the right to say and do what you want. And I was going back to that. Watching that 141 that had just come in to pick us up, I think I had a bit of apprehension, not really knowing what to expect, but knowing that there was freedom out there, and the 141 represented my flight to freedom.